Hello, and welcome to Team BURAN's final demonstration of our game project. In this presentation, you'll find a little bit about the architecture, the programming that was used to create the game, some gameplay, and finally the credits. Here's a high-level view of the architecture. We have players interacting with the graphical user interface through a web browser that communicates with the server that maintains the overall state of the game. Messages are sent back from the server to the players through the graphical user interface. Our system consisted of two subsystems, the server and the client. The server handles all of the business logic and maintains the overall state of the game, while the client provides the GUI so that players can interact with the game. Players can interact with the game by clicking on the game board, choosing actions such as moving, suggest, or accusing, receiving global and player-specific messages, and interacting with a note card that players can use to keep track of their progress during the game. For the programming, node.js was used. Node.js is a JavaScript that's suitable for server-client applications that utilizes a non-blocking I/O on a single thread. For the server, the Express.js framework was used, and for the client, the React.js framework was used. Server-client communication was accomplished through WebSocket APIs, and the synchronization of the server and client was through a REST API. Messages were sent back and forth through the server and client as JavaScript object notation messages, or JSON messages. Okay, we're going to demonstrate our game running on one computer locally. To do that, we're going to need to start up both the server and the client. So I've opened up two command windows. The command window on the left, we've navigated to the server folder, and the command window on the right, we've navigated to the client folder. Let's go ahead and start up the server by typing in npm start. This will start the server and show us that the server is running on port 5000. Next, let's start up the client by typing in the same command, npm start. This will open up a web browser and will bring us to our character selection screen. Here's our character selection screen. We can see if we hover over any of the characters, their outlines turn white, indicating that we can choose that character. But before we do that, let's go ahead and copy this address and open up another tab. We want to do that to get another character selection screen. Let's go back to the first tab and pick the first player to join the game. We'll be playing two players against each other for this demonstration. So I'm going to pick Colonel Mustard, and then in the second tab, I'm going to pick another character. Now note here that since Colonel Mustard has already been chosen, we can't pick Colonel Mustard for the next player. Let's go ahead and pick Professor Plum. Here's Professor Plum's viewing screen. Let's go ahead and take a look at some of the features of this screen. First of all, we can see Professor Plum's hand. These are the cards that were dealt to him at the beginning of the game. We can see that he was dealt the Professor Plum card, the billiard room card, and the rope card. Below that, we can see the board and all the characters on the board. To the right of that, we have our detective notebook, which can be updated as the game goes on. This is unique to each player. Let's go ahead and update this now. Since Professor Plum knows what cards he has, he should update his detective notebook, indicating that he did not commit the murder, it was not done in the billiard room, and the rope wasn't the weapon that was involved. Below this screen, we have the messaging screen. This is where global and unique messages are displayed to the players. Right now we're seeing two global messages. One that Colonel Mustard has joined the game and the other that Professor Plum has joined the game. Okay, let's start to make some moves. Since Colonel Mustard was the first to join, he's the first to make a move. So he's going to make a move. He can also make an accusation, but we'll start off with making a move. And he's going to move to the right of the lounge. And since he can't do anything else, he's going to end his turn. Next up is Professor Plum's turn. So we're going to move Professor Plum to the left towards the conservatory, and we'll end his turn. Okay, next up is Colonel Mustard, and Colonel Mustard is going to make a move, but he's just going to stay where he is, so we're not going to move his character at all by clicking on the screen. We're just going to end the turn. Next up, Professor Plum is going to move, and he's going to move into the conservatory. Now, once a player is in one of the rooms, they can make a suggestion. So let's let Professor Plum make a suggestion. He's going to suggest that Mr. Green committed the murder with the candlestick in the conservatory. So he'll make a suggestion. Note that Mr. Green character piece has been immediately moved towards the conservatory, and that Professor Plum in the message here suggests that Mr. Green did it in the conservatory with a candlestick. So the next person to be able to disprove that is Mr. Green. And Mr. Green did have the card Mr. Green, and he showed it to Professor Plum. Note that that message does not come up in Colonel Mustard's screen. That message is a unique message. So what Professor Plum should do is he should update his detective note card. So he'll indicate that Mr. Green did not commit the murder. Going back to Colonel Mustard, he's going to make a move, but again, he's not going to move. He's just going to stay in that position. The reason we want to do that is we want to demonstrate how this blocks the move of Professor Plum if he wants to exit the conservatory towards the left. So let's go ahead and try that. We're going to move Professor Plum, and we're going to click on this hallway, and we get the message that the hallway is occupied, which means that he cannot move there. Okay? But he can move to downwards from the conservatory, so that'll end his turn. Let's demonstrate what happens when a player character, someone who's actively playing the game, can disprove or prove a suggestion. So let's move Colonel Mustard in the conservatory, and let's let him make a suggestion. He's going to make a suggestion that it was done in the conservatory by Mrs. White with the lead pipe, and suggest. Okay, Mrs. Scarlet didn't have any of the matching cards, so let's go over to Professor Plum's viewing window. He's the next in line to disprove it. Mrs. White in the conservatory with the lead pipe. Okay, does Professor Plum have any of those cards? No, he does not, so he'll click he didn't have it. Okay, if we go back to Colonel Mustard's screen, we can see that one of the non-player characters did have the card. Mr. Green had the lead pipe. So we'll update Colonel Mustard's card appropriately. Here we have a situation where Professor Plum has suggested Mrs. Peacock committing the murder in the billiard room with the candlestick. Mr. Green, Mrs. White, and Mrs. Peacock, all non-playing characters, have indicated that they don't have any of the matching cards. Play goes to Colonel Mustard, and Colonel Mustard, an active player, indicated that he didn't have any of the cards. Mrs. Scarlet, another non-playing character, showed no card, so we get this message that no players were able to refute the suggestion. Since the candlestick was one of the items that haven't been marked in on the detective notebook card, that's a strong indicator that the candlestick was used to commit the murder. So Professor Plum is getting close to being able to make an accusation. Colonel Mustard thinks he's ready to make an accusation. We're going to make an accusation that we know to be false. So Colonel Mustard's going to suggest that he did it with the wrench in the ballroom, and we're going to accuse. Okay, so we get this note here that Colonel Mustard is incorrect. The player is now inactive. So that means that he cannot play anymore. One additional feature that was added to the game that we feel is an enhancement is a chat feature. If we're in Colonel Mustard's screen right now, we can see in the lower left-hand corner that there's a chat window. Let's go ahead and click on that. If we click on that, we have an option to type a message. So let's type a message to Professor Plum. Let's say, "Hello, Professor Plum." Okay, once we hit enter, we can see that the message has been logged. And if we go over to Professor Plum's screen, we can see that there's a new message. And if we click on the chat, we can see the message coming from Professor Plum. Professor Plum can also type a message back to all the players. There's Professor Plum's message back to Colonel Mustard. We can see it in his chat window, and if we go back to Colonel Mustard's chat window, we can see the message there as well. That concludes our game demonstration. We hope you enjoyed it.